called a narcissist. I've been called a money hungry. He took a paid family medical leave for 12 weeks. He was being paid, and then just willingly did not pay any child support for 12 weeks during school, back to school time. Eva had just had surgery. When I asked him why he wasn't paying it, he told me that he knew child support couldn't garnish that. I contacted DCS. They can't garnish Washington state paid leave. He also then told me that he had moved all of his vehicles into his girlfriend Lita's name so that they couldn't put a lien on it. He inherited a house from his dad, who's passed away now, and he's leaving it in his name and not refinancing his name so that they can't put a lien on it.
We have Perry Foreman and Jessica Foreman. Here we have Ms. Holder present. She represents Perry Foreman. And I'll ask if Mr. Foreman's on the line. Perry Foreman, are you here today? Okay, don't see him, nor do I hear a response. And then Jessica Foreman's on the line. Ms. Foreman, are you there?
Yes, and I don't know why my name tag says Claire, but I'm definitely not Claire.
Okay, all right, good. Thanks, Ms. Foreman. And we are here today on, it looks like Mr. Foreman's motion for clarification related to the child support order and just kind of the payment and the payment and reimbursement for the tax exemption. So I've read over the pleadings that were submitted by the parties. I took special care to look at the child support worksheets submitted on June 1st, 2022, looked at the minutes from that related to uninsured medical expenses and the like. So I'm ready to hear from the parties. So Ms. Holder, you're the moving party. I'll hear from you, please.
Yes, Your Honor. Mr. Foreman is not contending that he should not be paying for medical expenses or for any overdue child support in order to get to qualify to be able to file for taxes and claim Jack, his son, on his taxes. What happened here is, if you look at the clerk notes from the June 6th hearing when those orders were entered, there was an issue where Ms. Foreman would put forward a large bill toward the end of the year, making it almost insurmountable for Mr. Foreman to cover that. And then he was unable to claim his son on his taxes. So that seemed to have happened again this year, but a little bit different. What happened this time was Ms. Foreman took one of their children to get an orthodontic treatment in May of 2022. She let Mr. Foreman know via text that I took Eva to go get orthodontic treatment. And then Mr. Foreman forgot about it. And when he asked her via text in January, because Ms. Foreman had until the 31st to inform him how much money he owed, when he asked, what's the deal here? How much do I owe? I want to be able to pay that off so I can claim Jack on taxes. And she just didn't respond. Now, there was a time where Mr. Foreman sent an app to Ms. Foreman for expense tracking. And as per the court order, he needed to be current on child support and medical payments. What Ms. Foreman did was she downloaded the app and she put all of that information in, including extracurriculars, and it became very overwhelming for Mr. Foreman. So what he did was he just basically said, forget this, I'll just ask her. So he deleted the app. He did not know that in deleting his portion of the app, it didn't also delete Ms. Foreman, and that she still had the ability to keep adding things onto the account on the app. So in January of this past year, when Mr. Foreman asked, how much money do I still owe? Ms. Foreman very easily could have said, you owe $75, half of 150, because that's what he was outstanding. She could have said, oh, I added it into the app, why don't you go look? But she didn't do any of that. She just didn't respond. And so then when he called his caseworker and the caseworker said, you're actually ahead $10, you can go ahead and claim Jack. He then told Ms. Foreman, I'm going to go ahead and claim Jack. My caseworker says it's fine. She's like, no, you're still behind. She had the opportunity to tell him he was behind, but she didn't do it. And so he missed out on being able to claim his son on taxes over $75. And that's why we're asking for the clarification to make sure this doesn't happen again, so that Ms. Foreman has to give Mr. Foreman information. We're suggesting the 5th of the month that allows her to do any kind of medical expensing, to get any kind of copays, anything like that for an entire month, and gives her an additional 5 days to let him know, hey, in June, on July 5th, hey, the month of June, this is how much you owe for June. That way he understands, he knows, he doesn't get overwhelmed by the app. He's not using the app because, again, she was putting a lot of stuff in there that he didn't need to be responsible for in order to claim Jack on his taxes. So now that he hasn't been able to claim Jack on his taxes, he's behind by about $1,000 for this year. So we're not contending and we're not coming to court for anything that's owed in 2023 for him to be able to claim the children on the taxes for 2024. We're just saying what happened was, either it was either an accident or it was an oversight, but it shouldn't happen again. And he shouldn't miss the opportunity to claim his son and his taxes over $75. So we're just asking for clarification that she has to inform him once a month in writing that this is how much you owe, so this doesn't happen again. And we're also asking that the money that she got for the tax refund last year for claiming Jack goes to Mr. Foreman so that he can have that money and he can also be current on this year, because that seems to be the holdup for him, is if he'd have gotten that tax refund, he wouldn't be so far behind this year. So that's what we're asking for, is a clarification that Ms. Foreman give back the money that she claimed for Jack this year on taxes, and also have a date that she needs to inform Mr. Foreman every single month of how much he owes, so he doesn't get behind like that again.
Ms. Holder, do you have an estimate as far as the dollar amount of the tax refund?
I do not. Ms. Foreman has not disclosed how much she got in the tax refund to us, and Mr. Foreman, because he did not claim Jack, is not sure how much he would have got.
All right, thank you. Okay, Ms. Foreman.
Yeah, so first off, I'd just like to address the large bill that was given to, Mr. Foreman at the end of 2022. That was for uninsured orthodontia for Eva, our daughter. It wasn't necessarily a large bill given at the end of the year. DCS requires you to have a $500 threshold. The bill must be $500 or larger to turn in. So once I turned that in, it was turned in October of 2022. So then once they did all their paperwork, they gave him 30 days to respond and then set in garnishment because he never had responded. This is 2021. I'm backwards. This is 2021. In 2022, Ms. Winkles was my attorney, and I did claim both the children for that year. And then his attorney, Andrea Blond, came back and said, no, medical does not count. It's not for medical, it's only child support. I amended my taxes, I signed the form, and I gave it to him. For the year of 2021, Mr. Foreman did claim Jack. So when we went to court on June 1st of 2022, I asked that the child support would include extracurriculars, uninsured medical, and child support. He said, yes, it would. And the extracurriculars were not contingent upon filing any of the children or Jack for the taxes. So this year in 2022, when we went to court, in the minutes, you can see the orthodontia was addressed. They asked if there was any bills. I stated, yes, there was. The judge, so he was told then that there was a bill. I texted him. He then sent me the information for the app. So I did start downloading. Or uploading those bills. I did send screenshots of the app. You can clearly see that they're divided by medical expenses, extracurricular expenses. So in his first declaration, he stated he immediately just quit using the app, uninstalled it. Although it does send email notifications as well. So even uninstalling the app, he would have received all of these as well. Through 2022, he also argued when I did tell them that there were bills, there were multiple phone calls over the phone, that medical didn't count. It was like the following year. I sent him screenshots of the parenting plan. I circled those. I included that as well, saying, yes, it does count. The story has changed 4 times since this proceeding. So first story is that the medical didn't count. And that was Exhibit 7B. Second story, 7E, was that I used the app, so it was my own fault. Using the app made it non-void, even though I was never told he was no longer using the app. Third story is in first declaration he sent in with the motion was he stated he was completely unaware of any expenses. Fourth story was in the second declaration when he stated he was overwhelmed by the expenses that he was aware of. Mr. Foreman, he states that he's behind on medical, childcare, extracurricular, and attorney fees because he was not able to claim Jack in 2022. Attorney fees were ordered in 2020. For the year of 22, he's owed $593.50 in medical and extracurricular. For the year of that was before even being able to claim Jack. That was before this. 2023, he owes $837.71 in medical and extracurricular. Perry's never once made a payment on medical, extracurricular, or attorney fees since orders to do so in May of 2022. Since I found out from Ms. Holder back at the beginning of this year that he was no longer using the app, I've asked him multiple times, as you can see through my exhibits, are you still using the app? Where would you like me to send these? How would you like me to send these to you? I get laughing emojis back. I've emailed him copies of all the bills. The app will break down into a spreadsheet, the total, the picture of the bill, exactly what his portion is, when it was submitted, when it was due, and I get laughing emojis back. I understand that these are his proportions of the bills and that this is me not asking him to pay the bills. This is asking him to reimburse me. This money I've paid double. I have to pay him in full before I bill him. Our daughter just had meniscus surgery in June. I have to pay all of those bills in full. I'm doing my best as a mom for some, dealing with the fact that I'm paying solely for their extracurricular, their medical, everything. I've never, since 2018, since their separation, asked him to pay for a premium of any of their medical insurance. In September of this year, I lost insurance at work, and I asked Mr. Foreman to add Eva to his insurance. He agreed, as you can see in the statements or in the exhibits. He agreed, and then he texted me and said that I only had 1 month for our daughter who just had knee surgery on insurance. So I called him and asked him. He told me that if I wasn't going to pardon everything he owes me, that he'd be removing her as being blackmailed. So I called DCS and asked if they would put an obligated medical order on her so he couldn't remove them. Also this year, he took a paid family medical leave for 12 weeks. He was being paid and then just willingly did not pay any child support for 12 weeks during school, back to school time. Eva had just had surgery. When I asked him why he wasn't paying it, he told me that he knew child support couldn't garnish that. I contacted DCS. They can't garnish Washington State paid leave. He also then told me that he had moved all of his vehicles into his girlfriend Lita's name so that they couldn't put a lien on it. He inherited a house from his dad, who's passed away now. He's leaving it in his name and not refinancing his name so that they can't put a lien on it. Mr. Foreman has never willingly paid for anything for these children unless he is garnished. There has never been one payment made. I asked him during this time of not getting any child support if he would help pay for Jack's baseball stuff, as I was not getting child support, extracurricular, medical, anything, with no response back. The totals were $60. I have those exhibits as well. This is not a for clarification. This is strictly about the money. I've asked him to clarify multiple times to me, how would you like me to send your bills? Would you like me to use that? Would you like me to email? What would you like me to do? This is absolute neglect of these children that I'm trying to take care of as best as I can. Asking me to pay this back would just be lacking in the bills that are already racking up that I'm having to pay because I can't bill him for them until I pay them.
Thank you, Ms. Foreman. Just a quick question. Ms. Holder raised an issue that at the end of January, there was some communication allegedly about, how much do I owe? And the indication from Mr. Foreman was that he didn't receive a call back. Can you give me your detail on that?
Absolutely. So they actually included the text message in in their last declaration, and it's not a how much do I owe you. Those words have never come to me in the time that I've known Mr. Foreman. The text messages, are you going to send the deal so I can claim Jack on taxes? This conversation had happened multiple times before this text happened, and with him not agreeing that medical was included, I had talked to him multiple times about this. I had circled the parenting plan and sent it to him, and he said medical isn't included. So I was not about to start another argument during this. We had argued for months about medical being included. And as you can see through my exhibits, in the arguments, I'm called a narcissist. I'm blamed for the inflation as a Trump fighter or Biden supporter. I've been called a money hungry. I've never asked for the child support to go up. And so I was not responding to this text message. And like I said, he didn't ask me how much money was owed. He said, are you going to send me the deal so I can claim Jack on taxes? This conversation had happened so many times that I was not wanting to be called any more names or put down anymore. If I would have told him right here again for the 100th time, after the judge told him, I've told him that medical was due, it would have been an absolute fight.
Thank you. And I guess the same question I asked Ms. Holder, what was the amount of the tax refund or the exemption amount?
I believe that I got $1,000, it was like $1,100 back is what I got.
Right, thank you. Right, Ms. Holder, brief response.
Yes. Well, I understand that the parties have had a difficult time communicating. The January text in which he says, can you send me the deal so I can claim Jack on taxes? It's clear from Ms. Foreman's response that she knew what that was in relation to. And instead of getting into a fight about medical or not medical or child support or extracurriculars, she could have just said, you owe $75. And while I understand that, you know, and her thinking is he's never said, what do I owe you? This was his way of doing it. And she knew that, and she didn't want to get into it. And she didn't want to respond, and she didn't want to answer. And that's why we're asking for the clarification, is because it's very clear that the parties have a contentious relationship when it comes to communicating, when it comes to Mr. Foreman, you know, checking or not checking emails or apps, Ms. Foreman putting a lot of information and thought into communicating with Mr. Foreman, and how much, you know, she has tried to communicate in her way, he's tried to communicate in his way. It clearly doesn't match up, which is why we're asking for the court to come forward and clarify and say, Ms. Foreman, this is how you are to tell him once a month how much he owes, so that he either doesn't have to ask, or that when he does ask, he gets a clear answer at a certain time so he knows what to expect. I think that might be part of the issue is the parties just, the expectations are just different. And that again is why we're asking that there needs to be a clarification made. This isn't about extracurriculars. This isn't about anything else. It's literally about how much does he owe in child support, how much does he owe in medical, so that he can make sure that he claims the child on taxes every year, if he's entitled to do that. And that's again why we're asking for this clarification.
Okay, all right, thank you. All right, so my sense here is I tend to agree that there just needs to be some guidance and help as far as the communication. Both parties see things differently. So as far as the going forward, it sounds like the parties at one point were using the Onward app, and that seems like it was an app that provided a lot of information, provided in a lot of different formats and ways. And it sounded like Mr. Foreman just simply wanted somebody to spoon feed him, and that he got overwhelmed. And that, you know, there may be a lot of reasons why for the overwhelm. It may be a variety of things, but the sense I get is that Mr. Foreman doesn't want to dig in and track those costs. He just wants somebody to say, okay, this is what the bill was, this is how much you owe, pay it by this date or what have you, rather than actually seeing the bills or the invoices of the services that have been rendered for behalf of the children. So there's a request for basically that information to be sent by the 5th of each month. I think the parties, the Onward app, if Mr. Foreman needs some assistance in kind of using that app, I'm sure he can find somebody that can provide him some assistance. I think, you know, sometimes more information can be better. It can be overwhelming. I agree with that. And yet having the base documents or foundational documents from which any dollar amounts are owed, I think is helpful and important, that there's full information. So I think the Onward app provides that. And so I'm going to grant the request that the both parties download and continue to use the Onward app, and that Ms. Foreman will forward by the 5th of each month from the prior month expenses any costs associated with uninsured medical to Mr. Foreman, and Mr. Foreman has an equal duty to open up and regularly review that That way everybody's going to know what the documents are. And it may be more information than Mr. Foreman wants, but yet I think that's important that all the information is present. So the parties will be required to use the Onward app. If there's any fees, they'll have to pay that respectively themselves for their portion. And then Ms. Foreman will just download that information, upload it, whatever you want to call it. And then Mr. Foreman will be obligated to review it. And then both parties are apprised and obligated to follow and use that app. As far as the reimbursement of the tax exemption, I hear where Mr. Foreman's coming from as far as the $75 loss that caused him to lose out on $1,100 of a tax exemption. And yet it seems like the issue of the orthodontia care or the uninsured medical care, I'm not sure if it's the orthodontia, was known, had been discussed briefly. Would have been easy for Ms. Foreman to simply have said, yeah, this is the dollar amount that you owe me, send it. That probably could have taken care of things, but it sounds like there'd been a course or a path that the parties had walked that the communication was somewhat strained and the like. So I think there was notice to Mr. Foreman of that a bill was owed and that he could have found that out through a variety of ways, and he did not. So I'm going to deny the request to have Ms. Foreman reimburse Mr. Foreman the tax exemption. So I'll deny that. So I think those are the two issues that the parties presented for his decision today. Yes, Ms. Foreman.
I just have one question I just want to clarify on.
Yeah.
So if I get a bill, so I usually upload same day. I've continued along with the emails. So I've been emailing and using the Onward app. My question is because of him getting so overwhelmed so easily, I just received a $174 bill for my daughter, for our daughter. Now I can't pay that right off the bat. So I'm going to send, $25, every month or every 2 weeks until I get it paid off. Does Mr. Foreman want me to submit the $25 I paid every month along with the bill? Because it's going to show like it's not paid in full. So the bill will say 120, 174. The payment's going to say 75. Is that going to be too overwhelming for him? Or would he like me to pay that 174 off and then submit the bill?
I guess, Ms. Holder, you can chime in on that. My take on it is that once he's given notice of his portion of the bill, then there's no further need to give additional notice.
What I can do, Your Honor, Ms. Foreman, is I can contact Mr. Foreman and see how he would like that information, and I can get back to you so that the communication is done a little bit more easily. Okay,
perfect. Yeah, because I would be willing to do either one of those options.
Okay. As far as an order summarizing today's decision, could we look at setting a presentation date on November 7th? My assumption is Ms. Holder will prepare that order and she'll distribute it to Ms. Foreman. If you agree with the order that it accurately summarizes or reflects what occurred here today, you could simply sign off on it and then it'd be submitted to the court for signature. I always like to set kind of a backstop date. So I'm looking at November 7th for a presentation date. And
there's no arguments or anything like that. It's just a presentation of the final order that I'll be signing.
Yeah, it's, sometimes a judge will give an oral ruling and one party will write it down and the other party feels like, oh, that's not quite right. And they can file an objection to what the presented summary is. And then I could look at both the presented order and then any objections to the same.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
So I'm looking at setting that to November 7th at 9 a.m. Ms. Holder, does that work for you?
That does, Your Honor. Thank you.
Okay. And Ms. Foreman, November 7th for a presentation date?
Yes, that works for me as well.
Okay, we'll set it to that date, November 7th at 9 a.m. If there's no other issues, we'll conclude that case for today.
About 2 years after Tyler was born, you did tell me I cheated on you. He's not yours. You've told me that at least 5 to 6 times. So when you said that was a lie. You've told me many times that he's not mine. Out of spite, out of anger, I don't know what it's
Objection, he's testifying. That's not a question.
Mr. Thompson,
have you told me that he's not that I'm not the father?